What are you talking?
Beautiful mom.
Yeah.
And family
How you
members
doing?
doing well.
I'll tell you
It's rained.
experience
Oh, yeah.
that might be relevant to you. Okay. I'm not going to take to the listening for but yeah.
Melanie, are we live?
It's a scary thing
Okay.
to have, you turn your head and all of a sudden. Yeah. We're ready to go?
We're ready to go.
All right. I think we'll start with a shortened version of our roll call today.
Your Wonderman,
Here.
Director Alba,
Here.
Director Jude.
Here.
Those of you who are able, if you would stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And so, welcome to the San Francisco Bay Ferry Board of Directors meeting for the month of February. This meeting is being conducted in person and by video conference being recorded. To reduce background noise, all video conference participants will be joining the meeting in listen-only mode and muted during the discussion. San Francisco Bay Ferry welcomes comments from the public. A public comment period will be set aside after each discussion period and will be accepted in person and by video conference. Video conference participants wishing to speak are requested to email your name and the item number you'd like to comment on to boardofdirectors@watertransit.org. If you are unable to send an email, you will be given an opportunity to speak on the item after those who have signed up. So thanks all for coming on this very weathery day here in San Francisco. And I know we need the precipitation in California, and hopefully our friends in Los Angeles and Southern California aren't being washed out, not enough and then maybe too much, but let's hope for the best. My report is brief. I've used the ferry a number of times in the last few weeks, and I just have to say it's great. It used to be you could always find a row that was your own row, and that was the thing. Like, okay, no one's in that row, so you can't do that anymore on the Oakland to San Francisco line very much. You really are going to have to share at least the row with other people, and one of these days all the seats will be full again. But I know that the numbers are promising, and we'll talk about that in a little while. I just want to thank the team from this organization and the working folks at who work on the boats on Blue and Gold and do really a terrific job. And I've also been on a couple of times when it was raining hard like this, and people are very helpful and thoughtful about warning people like me who sometimes think about falling and stuff like that to be careful and watchful and stuff. So just want to thank for that. And I know we will hear about. I won't get into it because it'll be part of the reports on our government relations agenda, including our federal agenda. But we're in a lot of uncharted territory now. We've had a lot of funds that have been in historic terms promised to us that we want to make sure that we that those promises. That's not something that's going to that will happen probably just with a good cheer. It's going to take work, and I know there's work going on to make sure that we're positioned to really do our best in this. So, but these are different times, and times are certainly changing. So with that, I shall turn it over to Director Alba for her comments.
I have no updates today. Good to see so many in the room.
Glad you're here. Director Du.
Thank you. I had the opportunity to attend the Passenger Vessel Association conference in Savannah, Georgia, a couple weeks ago with Lauren and Seamus, and got to test out the Artemis vessel. So that was really interesting. I have in my notes, it only went 26 knots that day, but I have in my notes that it goes 36 knots and 2-meter draft with retractable foil, I think was what it said. And then 50 nautical mile distance. So, very interesting for our agency. And then learned a lot about systems integration and fire suppression challenges in the industry. So it was a really great experience and I learned a ton. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
That's great.
And Artemis will be here in April, I think, for climate week, something like that. So
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, having heard from our fellow directors, let's turn it over to Director Murphy and the team.
Great, thanks, Chair Wonderman. We did move the federal legislative update to the top of the reports of staff for this meeting. You mentioned it, but obviously we have a lot of uncertainty around how many of the administration's actions are going to affect grants that we have been awarded, funding that Congress has authorized and appropriated and directed the executive branch to award. In many cases, those awards have come our way, but we're not alone. There's the entire industry is very challenged right now by the uncertainty of how some of the executive orders and administration's actions are going to affect funding that is available and by law authorized to be spent in certain ways. And it's not just our industry. Obviously, there's just uncertainty pretty much across the board when it comes to the impacts of the administration's actions. So we're going to zero in a little bit on what that means for us and what we think and what we're doing to try and reduce eventually some of that uncertainty. There's only so much we can do, but what's at risk is something that we do want to cover here today. And to give us an overview of that, I just want to check with Lauren, make sure that we have. Okay. We have Ray Buhiger from Accelerate Partners, our federal legislative advocate, and Melanie, if you can allow him to unmute and provide us with an update, that would be great. Ray, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Seamus. Hey, everyone. Good to see you virtually today. I will just give a very high level overview covering things that we're seeing come out of the Trump administration, plus things that we're tracking in Congress. I'll keep it brief so that people can ask questions, but maybe I'll go to the report that we delivered to the board and just walk through that really quickly. So as you know, we work with Lauren and Seamus and Terrence and others on staff to advocate for funding for programs that provide money to public ferry systems through the annual appropriations process. And we are continuing to do that for the FY25 approps process. So I think a lot of you probably know that the annual appropriations process generally starts around February of any given year. The president sends their budget to Congress, and then the 12 subcommittees of the appropriations committees that fund various parts of the government, they go through the process, they mark up bills, they pass them in the House and the Senate, and they're supposed to do this by September 30th, October 1 being the beginning of a federal fiscal year. The last time Congress did its homework on time, Bill Clinton was president. So since the 1990s, what has generally happened is that come September 30th, Congress will pass what's called a continuing resolution, a CR, that just extends the previous year's funding so that congressional leaders can find a way to come to an agreement on that particular fiscal year. Well, this particular year, we're here now in February, and Congress has not yet completed work in the FY25 process, even though fiscal year 2025 started on October 1st of last year. Right now, the current CR extends through March 14th, and what we're hearing is that it could be very difficult for congressional leaders, House, Senate, Democrat, Republican, to come to any sort of agreement. And we're hearing more and more that a full year continuing resolution is most likely. For us, for the programs that we've been advocating for, including the electric and low emitting ferry program, including the 5307, the FTA program, the competitive grant program where we pull a lot of money from. We've been successful the last 5 years to increase funding for those programs through the annual appropriations process. And so we've got more money in the bills for FY25. If they are able to actually get a full year budget, we'll have more money in those programs. If they have to do a CR and they point back to last year's funding, we were successful last year in getting more money for those programs, so there will be no more money in the programs either way. So I guess that's a good news story there. We're also working with staff, with Seamus and Lauren and Terrence, to ramp up for the reauthorization of the surface transportation bill. So all of these programs that we pull money from, whether it's the Federal Highway Administration Formula Program or the Federal Transit Administration Grant Program or the lower electric zero emission ferry program, all of these, the legal authority for DOT and for FTA to actually distribute this money comes from the surface transportation bill that Congress passes every 6 or so years, give or take. The current surface transportation bill, the legal authority that DOT has to carry out these grant programs, expires on September 30th of next year, of calendar year 2026. Even though we're still just about a year and a half out, the committees with jurisdiction over this bill are already starting to think about what that new bill will look like. And we hear from committee staff that they're going to start putting pen to paper as soon as mid-year this year. That means that anyone that wants to either preserve funding that they have now or increase funding, and that's what we're trying to do, is increase funding for the various programs that SF Bay Ferry takes advantage of. We're having those conversations now on the Hill and starting to lobby for that. And, as you know, and as we've talked about before, SF Bay Ferry, going back years and years and years and years ago, we came together with a few of the other biggest public ferry operators, and we created something called the Public Ferry Coalition. And this was just to ensure that it wasn't just SF Bay Ferry saying that we should increase funding for these programs. We had support from members of Congress from around the country because they had ferry systems in their states or districts that were saying the same thing. Well, Lauren and Seamus and Terrence have done a really good job sort of formalizing this coalition, and we're bringing more services into the coalition. We're bringing public ferry operators from all over the country, from red states, blue states, purple states, so that this push that we're making to increase funding for these programs is bipartisan, right? You all know who our members of Congress are in California and the San Francisco Bay Area. Well, that's great, but we also want to make sure that it's a bipartisan push. And that's why having this Public Ferry Coalition in place, that's why growing the membership is really important, because especially as in this environment for the type of money that we're going after, we all hear what President Trump and others in his administration are saying. Congress is its own branch of government and they can go their own direction. Members of Congress are going to fight for the funding that they believe benefits their constituents. And we're going to make sure that members of Congress from around the country understand that their constituents benefit from this money. So that's something that we're focusing a lot of time and effort on. So I guess I'll then just kind of land the plane here. So you all have seen since January 20th, various executive orders and memos come out of the White House and Office of Management and Budget. And there's been this sort of ping pong effect that, like Seamus said, has created a lot of confusion and has left a lot of people, not just in transit, not just in transportation, but in every industry that benefits from federal funding, all wondering what's happening now and what's going to happen going forward. You probably know there were these executive orders that targeted funding that is tied to, as the administration put it, diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, Green New Deal. Neither ones are legal terms. They're more terms of art than anything else, which creates even more ambiguity. OMB had issued a memo telling agencies to freeze all funding. We've had 2 courts issue temporary restraining orders saying that they can't, that the OMB memo is unlawful and unconstitutional, that they can't follow through with it. Even so, we've seen and heard various agencies still continue to either slow walk money or pause all grant making. The DOT, I'll say, has, as far as we can tell, been pretty good about continuing to flow money for formula grants and flow money for projects where you have a grantee has money in hand, a grant agreement is in place, and money has already started to get to be obligated. It's those projects where an award was made, but a grant agreement has not yet been signed. Those are the ones that are probably going to move the slowest. But even so, even for those grants like SFA ferries where we have grant money in hand, grant agreements are in place, money has already been spent. It does not look like that money is going to be threatened. However, working with Seamus and Lauren and Terrence, we're not taking anything for granted, and we're doing the work right now to ensure that members of Congress, our members of Congress and members of Congress that represent companies that are doing this work understand why this funding is important, so that if something were to change at DOT or if something were to change at EPA where we just got this grant, that we're able to pivot quickly and play defense if we have to. So there's the defense, let's defend the money we already have, and then there's the offense, let's make sure that we're growing the pot. We're doing both right now, but also just trying to keep up with these announcements in real time. Sorry, that was probably a longer report than I intended, but I'm happy to answer questions.
We could pause.
Thank you, I guess, for that, right? You know, I think you touched on all the issues. I could ask more questions, but I think you touched on the things I was a little confused about or concerned about. So other directors? Amos?
I'll just add to what Ray said, and say that we have $120 million in executed grants. We have submitted reimbursement for some of those grants as we're incurring expenses, and that reimbursement has been provided. So a lot of that's for preventative maintenance, state of good repair programs, unrelated to the reef effort, for example, but some of it is related to the reef program. We have $68 million in unexecuted grants, and the reason why they're not executed is because you have to get those grants into the TIP regionally. That takes some time, and then once it's in the TIP, you go through what can sometimes be a very slow FTA process to get those grants into the system and executed. They are in the system. They're in the TIP. They're not executed yet. We'll be working to execute those just as quickly as we possibly can. They're not all related to the reef program. Some of them are formula grants, but we do have two large grants that are related to the reef program for both the 150 passenger vessels and the electric floats. So we'll know, like others will, what happens when those grants are submitted for reimbursement. We'll keep the board informed along the way.
Yeah, and if I could just add, Seamus, in the conversations we've had with Lauren and Seamus, and frankly with other clients as well that have either received money through DOT or EPA or some of these other agencies, we've put in place this see something, say something policy, so that if, as the team is going through those motions, if you see something or hear something from an agency staffer or something's just not right, we need to address it right away. The unfortunate reality is that our congressional delegation is limited in what they can do to sort of affect this administration. But where the Democrats in Congress do have some leverage is with the coming expiration of the continuing resolution on March 14th. And you may start hearing more and more about a government shutdown just because that's frankly the only thing that Democrats could do to try to enact any sort of or press for any sort of change here in what the administration is doing. And so there's a lot more chatter about that. The reality is that neither the House nor the Senate leadership on the Republican side they can't get a full year funding bill in place without Democratic votes. The Democrats realize that. They're frustrated so far that they haven't been able to get answers from the administration or do anything to really stop what the Trump administration is doing. And so they may be looking at March 14th as their first opportunity to try to exact some leverage. So I just want to throw that out there as well.
Gotcha. I would say, what we're hearing is, I think that maybe this is always true, but it's more true that it's really the executive branch that's really weighing in on these things in a unique kind of way. And, while we may not have elected representatives in the region who are influential in the in the House of Representatives or in the US Senate, we do have, I'm thinking we have people in the area who were very involved with the president's campaign. And, maybe there's a way we could go about, maybe this isn't something for a board to do, but for folks to kind of look at who is, who's close to the administration, who also really likes SF Bay Ferry and understands the relationship between the region's success and having a ferry system that's, second to none. And maybe have some people who would agree to weigh in at the right time on our behalf, who could be influential. So I don't know who those people would be, or whether that's, pie in the sky. It could be, but something to think about, because there are, the president was here for a couple of fundraisers and in Silicon Valley for a couple of fundraisers. So, there's definitely some influence here. Whether it attaches to what we're doing, I don't know, but it might. Okay, go ahead. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks,
Go
everyone.
get him.
So we'll move on. I'm going to ask Mike Gowerty, our planning director, to come up and give us an update on the Mission Bay ferry landing. We've been moving forward with the planning for this project since the EPA Clean Ports grant announcement was made, and Mike will give us the latest.
Great, thanks, Seamus. Mike Gowerty, Director of Planning for the Authority. So Mission Bay obviously has been a project that's been very important to the agency for a number of years now. We've worked in close partnership with the Port of San Francisco to pursue the project. This has been essentially a shovel-ready project for a number of years. The part that has been missing is the final funding piece. And we were very fortunate last year to be successful in our grant application with the Port of San Francisco through the Clean Ports program to get the final piece of funding required to bring not only the original project concept forward, but that project in addition to the electrification of the terminal that would be capable of operating the small boats that were currently under construction. So that's the good news. The bad news, I think, is the vulnerability of that money. And we just covered that in the previous item. Notwithstanding that, we are moving forward with the Port of San Francisco in terms of defining the details of how this project will be delivered. And we are drafting a memorandum of understanding that's going to spell out those roles and responsibilities in terms of delivering the project and then ultimately operating, maintaining, and repairing the project. So that MOU should be coming forward as early as next board meeting in March. And in general, it's going to be consistent with kind of our long-standing business approach with the port. So on this project specifically, consistent with the current MOU we have with the port, they would largely do the construction contracting and deliver the construction of the project, with the exception of universal charging flow, which WETA would essentially basically own or provide to the port to install at the terminal, and that flow would be capable of charging the small electric boats that we're building. So that's kind of the path forward to delivery of the project. Once the project is up and operational, the goal of the parties is to largely follow the ownership model we established for the downtown terminal. So we have kind of a demarcation line at the boarding gate. Everything outboard of the boarding gate, the waterside premises, would be under the ownership and long-term maintenance responsibility of San Francisco Bay Ferry. And then the assets land side of that in a similar fashion would be the responsibility of the port. So again, very, very consistent with the approach that we have for the downtown ferry terminal. Current plans, pending the board's consideration of the MOU in March, the port would begin the first sequence of construction contracting to complete some remediation work, in water remediation work as early as this year. So we would need to begin having the funds flow to the project as early as this year. And we're projecting the final completion of the project to occur in 2028. So very exciting, but we're also understandably nervous given the required to deliver the project will ultimately be available. That said, we in this process of looking at scenarios for this project, we do have potential paths forward to operate a facility on an interim basis if necessary in event that the funds for the construction of the permanent slate dormitories. And then before turning over to questions, I'll maybe offer Aaron an opportunity to add any color or flavor to the financial analysis beyond the general discussion we had previously.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of points on the funding sources for the Mission Bay project. Overall, it's a $75.8 million project right now, prior to any procurement. So things change when they go in the field, but assuming that's correct, the EPA Clean Ports grant is supposed to pay $18.4 million of that. So that's the discussion of nervousness. The city family, various sources either have already put in or are putting in $20.9 million. The county, San Francisco County Transportation Authority sales tax funds are providing $4.5 million. UCSF is donating $4 million to the project. And then our funds, SFA Ferry Funds, we are putting in $28 million, which is $26 million of RM3 funding, 25 of which was Mission Bay money, and $1 million of matching funds from other things that were rolled into the project. And then $2 million of TIRCP money that was already dedicated to Mission Bay through the TIRCP process. So that's kind of the funding mix that we anticipate for the project going forward right now for the, the elements as they're defined today. So
How much of the 75 is a contingency?
there are, I think it's rolled into each project element because we're not doing the construction. Some of that is in the port's estimate, right? It's a big giant cost estimate, and each element has varying levels of contingency. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and in the report, assuming the MOU comes forward next March, we can provide a more detailed look at that.
And then upon completion, we're responsible for maintenance on the water side. They're responsible for maintenance on shore side. We don't pay anything for common area maintenance expected down the road.
So they're and the exact terms of the MOU will come forward next month. In general, if it follows the model that we have for downtown, the responsibilities would be relatively segregated.
Perfect.
And so there's a very small amount of infrastructure that is very specific on the land side that we actually do have responsibility for downtown. We're talking kind of about signage and ticketing devices, and it represents a relatively small maintenance burden on that side.
Answers my question perfectly. Thank you.
Other questions? Mission Bay? Stephen? did you want-
No, I was just giving a secret hand signal to Director Duke.
Okay, thank you very much.
Moving on, Chair Wonderman, we have a report from our emergency response and safety analyst, Cam Bachman, who is going to give us some information about SFA Ferry's new emergency response training program.
All right. Good afternoon, board. My name is Cam Bachman. I'm the emergency response and safety analyst for WETA, SFA Ferry. I want to talk a little bit about emergency response, an organization that, just for some context, I started back in September, and I took part in the functional exercise in October and got to observe that and see our staff's sort of preparedness and readiness level. Also, since then, I have been just doing sort of one-on-one conversations with folks, trying to understand their depth of knowledge about emergency response and how comfortable they feel if we were required to activate our EOC. And some things that I've found so far since I've started is discrepancies in preparedness levels and understanding of procedures. Some folks have been here for 15 years. Some people just started a few months ago. So this is totally understandable, but it is something that I think we need to work on sort of leveling the playing field, so to speak, and making sure folks are on a similar level of understanding when it comes to our roles and responsibilities in emergency response, and also folks' individual tasks that they need to complete if something does happen. Another thing I found is that there's a level of general inexperience with our communication systems. So we have some relatively advanced comm systems, P25 UHF radios, satellite phones, A lot of these things are not devices that people use on a day-to-day basis if they're not exposed to it. And that's a bit of a gap that I found where we could, again, level the playing field and get folks a little bit more comfortable with these communication systems if we were required to use them in an emergency. Also, currently, there's been no new hire emergency response training. So like I said, some folks just started with the agency and are kind of thrown into things without getting a general understanding of what their responsibilities are as a disaster service worker for the city and as a EOC staffer for the agency. So that's another area for improvement. And then I found the functional exercise. I only participated in one, but after speaking with folks, I found that generally they're a somewhat frustrating experience for people where it's almost a strict test of our capabilities and not a learning experience. So folks have found that a little bit challenging, and I think there's room for improvement with our yearly functional exercises too. So what I've done is in December, I created this plan that I call the 2025 Emergency Response Staff Training Plan. And the idea for this plan is that it's going to be iterated on a yearly basis. So this is the plan for 2025 that addresses our current state and our current needs. And then at the end of 2025, I'm going to revise this plan and create one for 2026 that sort of adapts to where we are at the end of this year, hopefully after having made some progress. So the plan sort of addresses all the pain points that I just mentioned in the last slide. So the goal is to have bi-monthly EOC trainings with each section and each staff person here. So sort of grouping the staff into their emergency response section and meeting with them bi-monthly, so once every 2 months for a 60 to 90-minute workshop, kind of hands-on, getting people familiar with the forms, the tools, things like that, just a regular touch point with the staff so they feel more comfortable and confident if they did have to staff an EOC. Also, quarterly hands-on communications tests. We just did one last week, and it went pretty well, testing our communication systems, making sure folks are familiar with those and they know how to use them, and also identifying any issues that we have while we're going through those tests, so we make sure that those are functional if they need to be. And then also a new hire emergency response onboarding program. So I've done this with a few of the new hire staff already, and that's just 2 60 to 90-minute sessions, again, giving them a lay of the land of what their responsibilities are in an emergency with this agency, because it is something a little bit special to us that I think a lot of folks might not have exposure to when they're being hired and when they come on board. And then improving the annual functional exercise is another goal of this plan. So this goes into a little bit more detail about kind of what I just talked about, but really the goal of the EOC training is just to get folks more comfortable and confident with their roles. And we've already done a few of these trainings already with the operations section and with some of the other sections, and I think folks have found them useful so far. And then, like I said, the comms tests, we're doing those on a quarterly basis, rotating through which systems we're going to be using. So just the other week, we practiced with our wireless priority dialing system, and that's something that you can use on your smartphone to make calls if the networks are congested. But the plan is to rotate through those, use our radios, our satellite phones, work on developing our virtual EOC through Microsoft Teams, making sure that we can stand that up quickly, because it is likely that if there is an emergency, we'll all be scattered all over the place, and people may or may not report to EOC, but they might sign on to Microsoft Teams, and we can do a virtual activation that way. And yeah, I talked a little bit about the new hire training already. And then the functional exercise is something that I think has room for improvement. I'd like to integrate Blue and Gold Fleet, our contract operator, into our yearly functional exercise to make it a little bit more realistic and practical, because without our contract operator, there is no real emergency response from SF Bay Ferry. So we want to make sure that they're looped into this year's exercise. And then also have pre and post trainings with the sectional groups, so that way they feel prepared and they're also able to internalize those lessons. But I think the real takeaway for the exercises is to make them a learning opportunity and a learning experience, and have the hosts of the exercise, stop and do training moments people and tell them how they can improve instead of just a strict test, like I said. Okay, so that's mostly what I wanted to mention to you guys. It's really, this plan is just going to address the needs for this year, and then we're going to look at it again at the end of the year and see how it can be renewed for 2026 to address any current needs. And it will also be open, of course, to staff feedback, and hopefully we can generate a positive feedback loop there where we hear what's working, what's not working, and tweak it year after year to make a really solid and effective program. And the last piece I wanted to mention is there is a RFP that just went out for consultant support for our emergency response planning. So you might hear about that in a few months. Working on renewing and revitalizing our emergency response plan and our emergency operation plan, which it has been a while since we've done that, so it could use a look at. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's very constructive and glad you're on the case. Questions, comments? Yeah, it's just, I'd say that, a lot better to do this now than after the fact.
Yeah, agreed. Preparedness is key.
Yeah, I know we put a lot of effort into it, so I'm proud that the organization has really attended to this, but your examination indicates that there's room to grow. So,
Yeah, exactly.
great.
Yeah, and emphasizing the training rather than the strength test, right? And it's so important because in these critical moments, the more prepared we are, the fewer mistakes we're going to make when we're in this situation. And so having more preparedness and also making it more fun and just the basic tenet of what your responsibilities are, and it's going to just vastly improve our emergency operations. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Is the board able to participate or observe the functional training events?
Yeah, I don't see why not. If you would like to, yeah.
We had a chance to do that last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if you could come and participate or just watch, either way.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Can't say enough about the quick work that Cam has done to draw more attention to this. I think everybody at the agency feels more prepared than we did just a few short months ago to respond, more confident in our ability to do that, and it's only going to get better as we go through the program that he's outlined. You have, Chair Wonderman, a review of financial statements in your packet and a state legislative update. I'm going to skip ahead to the ridership report and ask.
If I could.
Yes.
Yeah, I just was going to mention in reviewing the report, it would be helpful, at least to me, because it's kind of a long report. I've looked at it a lot of times and it's good, but it would be nice to have Erin a summary statement in there directing us to anything we should be looking at, because if we don't have it, we're looking down columns and rows, and if there's something you should be bringing to our attention that's off kilter or something that concerns you, or this uptick in the price of fuel is going to be a thing, or whatever it is, it would be nice to just kind of see that up front.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Will do.
All right, thank you.
Great. Gabe Chan, Transportation Planner, to provide a ridership report.
Good afternoon, Board of Directors. Gabriel Chan, Transportation Planner here at the Authority. So January was a very strong month for ferry ridership. It was not a strong month on the drought and rainfall front. And that tracks with kind of what we've observed in previous months as well. So we had over 203,000 boardings in January, which is 14% higher than what we had projected in the budget. And then compared to 2019 in the same month, we were at about 93% pre-pandemic. And as I mentioned before, the strong ridership that's materialized for us also kind of materialized for Barton Caltrain. They had a small uptick in their ridership as well, so the region's doing better, I think, when the weather's better, which is, something we've known for a long time. That being said, we're still doing better than our regional transit operator friends. They're still hovering in the 40s and 50s. Pre-pandemic ridership, we're on track to almost get to 100%. happy to take any questions.
So thank you, and that is, continuing good news. I realize our getting 100%, as the charts show very graphically, involves the reality that we're doing so much better on the weekends than we did back in 2019. So we adjusted our scheduling and our promotions and our fare to attract those riders. So, it might be good to compare separately on a chart, weekday or commute time, year over year stuff. Might be in there, but I'm not sure it is. So
Yeah, I think one of the charts is a 2019 versus the current year for by day.
by individual day, week, I think, right?
And by peak hours or by hour of day too, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think as a goal, it'd be nice to get us back to during the week where we were before, while we've got this growth on the weekend, which would mean we have more riders. We've got significantly more riders. But thinking about Mayor Lurie's commitment to get people back downtown, which, I was over at the Chase Center last night. He mentioned that a lot. This is, and we did an event yesterday. Bay Area Council did an event with Bart yesterday on the new fare gates. So they now have the new fare gates at all of the San Francisco stations. So there's, it's good. It's good. I think there is progress that's happening here. And if there are ways to think about how we might really kind of focus in on those commute hour passengers. I know we're always thinking about it, but that, I think that's got to be a goal for us to boost those numbers.
I think we do have weekday chart that we can include if it's not already in the ridership report.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it does show slower growth, but steady growth. But you're right, the weekends have really propelled us to where we are. And I like to think of it as we are offering more service on the weekend than we did before the pandemic, and that's helped the weekend ridership grow. But the weekend ridership is where we would have grown to if there was never a pandemic in the first place. We're just not there during the week because of the work from home, remote work persisting.
That part of the challenge of getting people onto the ferry during the week is their reluctance to come to San Francisco.
Yeah, they're just not going
it's
anywhere.
a destination-driven issue. But the more people want to come to San Francisco, the more of them will choose taking the various forms of mass transit, right? And so our strategy, whether it's a mass transit strategy or whether it's a SFA ferry strategy, has to be to work with the city here and get more, get people feeling more comfortable about being here, giving them more in the works, that the mayor's talking about doing with the arts and other kinds of events and things like that. And so, maybe there's a way we could be working with Alicia John Baptiste, who's kind of running the show in the mayor's office, who we worked with before at Spur, to see if there's ways we could kind of team up and make, special ferry accommodations to support city events. And I think this would be, I don't know what Mayor Lori thinks about the ferry yet. I don't know if we've taken them for a spin.
Not yet.
But it's, I'm sure that'll come, but it would be good to kind of gear up for that with not just here's how great the ferry is, but like, here's a plan of action, that we can partner on to get more people coming into the city. Because, they come from all directions. And, last time I looked at the city, they like to discourage people from driving and so forth. So, we offer a really great service to help him achieve what he's really trying to do, is revitalize the downtown area. And so I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Gabe. Chair Wonderman, we have reliability and on-time performance report. Tom Hall is here to answer any questions the board might have. It isn't very different from the last several reports that we've given, so we will make sure that we report on any significant changes as they come up. And we've separated that out from the ridership report now, just to make it more digestible. And then the last item that we have is our Chief Capital Program Delivery Officer, Gary Griggs, will give us the capital program quarterly report.
Works. Yeah. What I do. I hear. Chairwoman, directors, Executive Director Murphy and Council, Gary Griggs, Chief Program Officer. I'd like to give you the second quarterly report today. I gave you the first one in November, as you may remember. Would like to go through today. I apologize a little bit for my voice. Tim shipped me off to Sweden last week. You know, had it been a different time of the year, I'm sure somebody else would have gone, but I'll be talking a little bit more about that. As we go
If I
through the
could,
presentation.
you know, you've got voice issues and I've got people with voice issues at home, like sick families. So in order to get to the end of the agenda, I would just ask for this and all the items where we can keep it concise would be helpful. Because at 3 o'clock, I think I've got to go and that'll kill our quorum. So.
So this report is for the second quarter of fiscal year 24-25, which ended in December 31st, 2024. Of course, we're already 1 month into the next quarter, so there'll be a little bit of overlap in my discussion as I go forward and report. And the principal purpose of this is to give you a read on the key performance indicators as a measure of how we're performing, especially on the financial side. So that's what I'll be walking through today. I always like to start out by reminding us that we are working in a phased approach to the program. So we're concentrating heavily on phases 1 and 2 and structuring our approach to that, but being flexible because things are changing, funding changes, technical issues change. And so we are flexible, but that's still the basic goal that we're striving to, getting phase 1 up and operational. A few things in terms of the summary of what's been accomplished in the last quarter. We have been recruiting additional key staff into the organization, which was a goal of the board to look at expanding our organization to be consistent, to handle the increased capacity and work that we're undertaking. We had some really good accomplishments in terms of following your authorization, executed the contract and issued the notice to proceed for the 150 passenger vessels. That obviously is a major accomplishment. We're also in discussions with the 400 pax vessel top rank proposer and hope to be able to bring that to you fairly soon. The RFP, the request for proposal for the universal charging float, has been issued. We're getting a pretty good response back on that. We'll hopefully be coming to you with that in the near future to move forward with the contract award there. That, as you know, is a very unique piece of the project. And I'll talk more about some of the details of that as I move through the presentation. We also, on the repair and rehabilitation side, awarded the Gemini and main engine contracts. And then we issued an RFP for what we call the multi-bench professional services. And we've had a number of RFPs go out over the course of time for professional services, but we restructured this one a bit differently in that we broke it into a broad range of capabilities and benches, we call them, covering both the marine side and the land side, and also covering the different disciplines, whether it's planning, environmental, design, or construction management. And we packaged it into smaller packages that will help, I think, attract additional interest in the contracts and especially attract interest and involvement from underutilized and disadvantaged business enterprises. So we're looking forward to getting those proposals back in fairly soon and coming to you for awarding some more support. As you know, we depend heavily on these professional service firms that can give us the best services out there. We did, as part of that, I already mentioned enhancing the DBE program, and also you agreed and signed on to the equity pledge program, which we're very happy about, continuing to look for more opportunity for historically underutilized businesses to participate in our program. A lot of work is being done and a lot of advances being made on our landside electrification and terminal electrification. We're already at 65% design on Treasure Island, the terminal electrification. So that's moving along very nicely. We're working at River Bay and on Oakland, and of course, a lot of concentration on works in terms of terminal electrification. And then we've continued to do work to strengthen our project control system. And so we can come to you with performance indicators. The first key performance indicator I'd like to address is schedule. And I have to recognize Director Alba on this one. In my last presentation, I didn't talk about schedule, I talked about cost. And it was very good that you brought that to our attention, so I've added that in. So basically, we're laying out for each of the projects. We have about 30 projects here that we track in the program. We lay out what our plan schedule is. And then we track that. So this report gives you where our performance on the 31st.
Bless you.
And we basically, November, we look at what the plan schedule is, and then we look at where we are. And are we ahead or are we behind? And the key performance indicator there is what we call the schedule performance indicator. And as you can delay a bit the program. I want to also mention that this performance indicator I'm giving you is for phase one. And it's basically a consolidation of each of the individual projects. So we track each project individually for these indicators, and then we aggregate them. And we do that on a weighted basis because we have projects that go from anywhere from $1 million to $60 million. So we aggregate it on a weighted basis, and that's where I derive this number from. If you want more details on the individual projects, we can give that to you because we have a massive spreadsheet that lays it all out.
Mhm.
The next indicator is cost performance.
Gary, can I just ask
Yeah.
quickly on, so 0.7, does that mean we're at roughly 70, like 30% are slightly delayed or?
You could look at it that way. It's basically, if we're at 1, we're on schedule.
Yeah.
If we're at 0.7, so you could probably say maybe we're lagging about 30%.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it varies from one project to
Yeah.
another.
Yeah.
And we basically look, it's kind of an earned value approach similar to what we do on costs. And we have our project managers come in and look at each of their projects, tell us what they think the physical percent complete is for the project. Then we look at how that goes against plan.
Yeah.
I should also emphasize
The same question.
that I'm showing on this presentation what we call the critical path.
Mhm.
And that obviously is critical.
Yeah.
Because that's the path through the project that we don't have any float in. We don't, so if something gets extended on the activities related to the critical path, that means there's going to be delay in the overall program. A lot of the other activities, we have some float in it. So you can see here the critical path for phase one, for example, goes to the 150 vessels and drops down to Mission Bay. Treasure Island's also a part of phase one, but you can see Treasure Island, we have float there. We anticipate having that ready well in advance of Mission Bay. On the cost side, similar thing. So we basically follow the financial report in terms of the projects that we're reporting on. We show in the first column, basically the budgeted amounts, what the committed funds are. And we're doing a pretty good job there in terms of, do we have committed funding for the project? So obviously we want to try to make sure we have that in place. So that's what committed. Then we show what the costs were to date, the costs remaining, and the most important numbers on this table is projected. Based on our performance to date, what do we project ahead that we're going to have as a cost of this project? Right now, I'm showing a cost indicator of 1. It varies quite a lot as you go through project by project. And again, it's just the physical percent complete over the financial percent complete. One thing to understand on this is that sometimes we will be changing the budget. And that happened on the 150 PAX vessels, for example. So you, the board, will be telling us of and approving contracts to come in. They may be below or under or above the budget, and we have to adjust the budget accordingly. The other thing is we're right now going through our new budget, developing our budget, what we're bringing to you for approval. And that then will result in an update. Talk a little bit as well about risk management. And I showed this, and the two factors that we list, what's the probability of that risk occurring? And the second one, if it does occur, what's the impact of it? So we might say that a low probability, maybe 30%, medium 60, 90% high. And then in terms of impact, it could be a range of what the months effect would be, or what the dollar effect would be. And so we make that assessment, and we've been doing risk workshops to go through and identify the risks that we see, and then to develop mitigation measures. As you would expect, the top risk that we have on here is funding uncertainty, and that's obviously a high risk item. Cost escalation, schedule delays, always challenging, but we feel in technical, we feel they are a risk that we need to pay attention to, but we can manage it. The next thing is impact on current operations, which we have to, I skipped over one, sufficient utility capacity. That's the next one that shows up red. And we're throughout the country, we're seeing that the utility systems are being as everybody tries to electrify, and individual projects that were capacity that we need. So we need to address that flexibility, rearranging what our plan was, restructuring the program in a way that we can live with what's out there and available. Impact on current operations to battery electric zero emissions operations. We always have environmental challenges. I think the overall goal of this program is environmental stewardship. So I think we get some points for that, and the resource agencies, and very well with them, because we have a good end result that we're planning. Code compliance is a challenge, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on a case study. And basically what's happening, and as you know, we're drawing a lot of technology from outside the United States. And when you do that, you are dealing with technology that has codes and standards in the country from which it's United States. So we're working on this is the correct type of equipment that we should be using, and it is safe. At the end of the day, fire life safety is the primary issue. Construction impacts will always be a challenge, but we want to minimize impacts on our passengers, on homeowners, on businesses, and others that we may affect in our construction. And this stakeholder support, which we feel very good about. We're getting a lot of support from the major stakeholders out there that are helping us. I want to mention one thing on the left side here, and it came up earlier with Chair Wonderman about contingencies. There are two types of contingencies that we bring into each of our projects. One is allocated contingency. We can look at a project and we can say, we can have a pretty good idea of what we can see that the range of costs may be related to that. And we'll put a contingency on consistent with that. Could be 5%, 10%, 15%. Really depends on the stage of development of the project. So if we're very early in the project, we'll put the higher contingency. Later in the project, we'll drop it down. But then we also carry an unallocated contingency, a bottom line, because things are going to pop up, and that's what the risk assessment is all about. Things are going to come up that we're going to have to address in the future. We want to have some added contingency and unallocated that we can then bring in to specific projects as required. So here's a specific case. There's been a lot of tension on batteries, and rightfully so. And as we make the transition from fossil fuel transportation to battery transportation, there's going to be a lot of focus on it. There have been incidents out there, especially with EVs, fires in electric vehicles. There's the Moss Landing issue that's going on right now. So a lot of attention being paid to that. And that kind of hits two of the areas in the risk matrix. One is technical challenges, looking for service proven experience. And the other one being code compliance. And here, where the codes may or may not be applicable. A very good decision was made early on this program to use lithium titanium oxide batteries. And a lot of research went into that, and it's turning out to prove very, very good for us. And that was part of why I was in Stockholm last week, as we were doing fire testing of the suppression system for lithium titanium oxide batteries. A lot of the batteries are nickel magnesium density battery, but they don't have the durability and safety of these batteries. And it's because of a different thing. Maybe they're charged once a day. We're going to be charging these things continuously through the day, so they have to be a lot better performing battery. They're generally accepted in marine vessels in terms of they're operating around the world, especially in Scandinavia and elsewhere. Batteries in them with very little, if any, incidents. And then we come to code compliance, and that's where the issue gets a little bit more challenging, because the feeling is, and the history in the US has been, that you should use water for fire protection, fire suppression. And that's not a particularly good idea for electric batteries. So what we did is we felt what we need to do in our project and program that will address the concerns that are coming up in regard to what happens if these batteries get to what's called runaway thermal. And that's what we were doing. We're and set up a test facility. You can see in the right-hand corner, we basically used a shipping container, and we put racks in there that simulated the conditions we'll have, especially in our universal charging floats. And they have a battery modules, 24 battery modules. And the challenge and the thing we were trying to do was heat this battery system up to the point where it would have thermal runaway. And that means that the cells start popping, as they call it, escaping. And also, we need to bring it to a point where we can actually see a flame condition. The good news is we spent 3 days because it was almost impossible to get these choice that was made and bringing in LTO flammable condition, as you see on the left. And then we activated this foam suppression system, put it out within a minute, even to the point where you could walk into the test facility and touch the enclosures of the batteries, and it still wasn't at a temperature that was above what was tolerable. So the purpose of this was really to validate this fire suppression system, and we're using that and to try to get the fire marshals and the other fire authorities here in the US to understand that with this type of suppression system, we are going to be have the fire life safety requirements that our program requires. Any questions on that? We may actually do the testing over here, so they may have a chance to see it.
I just had to look at the difference between lithium ion battery and LTO batteries, and everything, they seem much, LTO seems.
Yeah, it was really a good choice. They're more expensive, as you'd expect.
Mm-hmm.
But Shandi has had a lot of experience in using these in ferry operations. Our universal charging floats a little more challenging, our floats, and that's where you get into some additional fire life safety considerations that we're trying to address by our fire suppression system. So with that, I'll wrap it up with a look ahead. We're continuing to recruit some additional project managers to look after these 30-some projects that we're undertaking. We are proceeding with the production of the 150 passenger vessels, so that's underway with All American up in the Puget Sound area. Board authorization for moving forward with the purchase of our 400 passenger vessels. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we got the RFP out on the universal charging float, so we'll be coming to you with that. hopefully to be able to move forward and award those contracts. Mike gave a good presentation on the MOU for Mission Bay. He's also working on the one for Treasure Island. So those are advancing and very critical to the success of the program. We plan to have the Treasure Island design move from 65 to 95 in the next few months. And then we're advancing the design on Seaplane, downtown Harbor Bay and Oakland as well. And then we have continuing environmental and planning work that's taking place on the Berkeley terminal and on Blakely as well, and of course Redwood City. So with that, I'll wrap it up, and if there are any questions, be happy to try to answer.
Thank you. It's obviously a very comprehensive piece of work. And I hope you don't quiz me.
No, that's great.
Gary, conversations with utility providers is not listed. Is that something that is on PG&E?
No, yeah.
But it wasn't listed on your.
I think I actually skipped over it. Let's see.
Oh, it's fine as long as you guys are.
No, definitely. Yeah, we're challenged in terms of the availability of energy from the utilities. So we're working very closely with PUC here and PG&E and Alameda Municipal and Alameda. But we're finding that some cases they're already tapped out, and we got to get increased capacity somewhere. And that's, by the way, another reason we're using the universal charging code is because that gives us battery energy storage so that we can buy energy at a favorable rate based on time of use rates.
Right.
I might just say one other thing, and Wonderman touched on it. We're giving you a fairly brief report for the quarterly report. I've been involved in projects where they're 100 pages long, but if you feel like you'd like to see more than what we're putting in this report, I'd be happy to add additional. So please let me know.
Oh, thank you. I think that is it, Seamus, for the staff report. Is there anything?
Yes, that concludes the executive director's report.
Okay, thank you very much. A lot to think of. Consent calendar. Let's go on to item 6. So that just includes the meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
And second.
Any recommended changes? Any need to do anything?
No.
Okay, you can call the roll.
Wonderman.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Wonder- I'm not sorry, Director Alba,
Yes.
Director Due.
Yes.
Okay, item 7, approved contract award to Ballyhoo Media for advertising services.
Great. Thank you, Chair Wonderman. To respect your request to keep it tight, I'll note that there's a staff report that lays everything out. We think this is a win-win for us. We got a really solid proposal from the industry leader in maritime supply side advertising programs. You adopted our advertising policy a little over 2 years ago. We told you then that it would be a pretty heavy lift to sell advertising and display it internally. We did our best over the course of the 2 years, knowing that we would want to expand and scale. And so we're ready to do that. Happy to answer any questions that you have about the staff report.
Does it include a trip to Florida for all the staff and the board?
Unfortunately not.
No. You can see them in action. Well, should we send a letter to Governor DeSantis saying how much we appreciate the support of the state of Florida here in the other sunny Golden State? I don't have any questions about it. I think it's it's a good step forward. It's all a matter of execution. I'd love to see us have more than 25% of the first tranche of revenue, but I get that we're not taking any risks. And I like all of the things you think that shouldn't be advertised. That it looked to me to be pretty comprehensive list of no-nos that we can avoid, because that's where you get into trouble. Directors, other thoughts about Ballyhoo?
Just a quick regarding the advertising policy. Speaking of Stockholm and Sweden, I know that many European countries, or maybe it's just Sweden, I don't know, but it's definitely happening in Sweden, where transit agencies that are now generating ad revenue, that they have eliminated any fossil fuel related advertising, since it's contrary to what the transit systems provide. And so that might just be something for the team to consider in the future, considering the current state. I don't know if that's a no-go, but just something for us to just keep an eye on. And I can send links if you're interested in learning more about that. And no other comments. This is fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
So it's a 5-year contract with a 5-year option. Is it a mutual option, or is it their option, or is it our option, or whose option is it?
So in the agreement, similar to all of our agreements, there is an opportunity for WETA to opt out pretty much at any time for cause. With this one, it essentially would renew after 5 years mutually, unless there is a cause to end it at that point. So the legal team at Nancy Bridget have done a great job of ensuring that WETA is protected. There was definitely interest from the proposer in this contract, given the upfront investment that they're going to do to replace our screens, do some other installations on the vessels. There's obviously interest in having the longest maximum term, and we were not going to beyond 10 years consistent with our administrative fee. But I don't know if there was anything else there.
Director Du.
Do we own the screens and everything that they're putting on, or do they own them?
So that's dealt with in the agreement. I believe when we talked about it with them, and there's language to memorialize this in the draft agreement that we'll work through with them, and we'll make sure that that's tied up. Essentially what they've said is after the 10 years, or if we opt out in 5 years, they're not going to use those screens for anything else. So they will leave them unless we want them to take them with it, but we'll make sure that's memorial.
Okay, other comments, questions? Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Are there members of the public signed up on this action item?
No one has that.
Anyone wish to speak on item number 7? They're here or there? Not seeing any. Let's call a roll, please.
Chair Wonderman.
Yes.
Director Alves.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we shall have a brief presentation on maintenance audit review.
And Chair Wonderman, this is a follow-up from the audit recommendations. We reported on those. You asked for a follow-up to talk about some of the things we were considering and what we've decided to do on those specific recommendations. Jeff Powell will cover that.
Director Wonderman, board members, Jeff House, Senior Project Manager. Yes, as Seamus mentioned, a year ago, we were tasked with getting an independent audit on the maintenance system. And we signed up Elliott Bay Design Group for that. They came on site and performed that audit on March 26th and 27th on site with some interviews and inspected our facilities and our maintenance program. There was some additional time they spent in that. It wasn't the only 2 days. They spent about a total of 10 days working on this audit. And they did review the CMMS system, which is the computerized maintenance management system, a crucial backbone to any door maintenance system. So there were a couple recommendations as a result of this audit. We believe we've tackled those, but by no means there's a lot to unpack in an audit. I don't want you to think or give you the impression that we focus just on these items and we tick the boxes and we're moving on. But just to touch on those briefly, there was they wanted some more effective controls in CMMS, and part of it was it did not track labor hours when we were performing maintenance. So there was no way to tell how much time it took to do a service on a boat. You know, these are basic things that the computerized maintenance management system should include. So we've asked Blue and Gold to address that with the maintenance provider. They're working on it. They came up with a solution. The solution is partially implemented. It's not completely implemented yet. I was sitting down with one of the managers last night, and he was showing me the labor hours it took over the last 3 months to change fuel filters. So we're seeing progress there. We're seeing good progress. Next there was another one about evaluating benefits of night shift engineers. We see a lot of value in that. Now we do regularly and quarterly review the labor bids, and we talk about that every time. There would be a huge infrastructure for our team to move to that approach, and we still evaluate it. We're looking at it. We haven't ruled it out, but we haven't said yes, that's what we're going to do yet. we're still holding that one in our back pocket. But the option is there for us to do that. Then there was another one with offset managers and port engineers. What we have is we have basically an engineering manager and a port engineer, and they were both there. They're supposed to take leads and leading the crew. So we've offset those, not on the weekends, but we have basically an engineering manager that comes in the morning, port engineer comes in overlapping in the afternoon. So we have that experience level covering both crews at the same time. We've done that one. As far as hiring practices, they want us to adjust the hiring practice. So we don't direct manage the hiring practice. That's why we have blue and gold there, right? However, we were interjected into the management approval. So when they bring a management on board, a management position, we do have a say in that. We believe we've tackled that one. There was another recommendation, and I don't know where this one came from, but it was to add a dedicated facilities and maintenance crew and dedicated vehicle and crew to take care of our maintenance facilities. We have 11 maintenance facilities. We have 22 engineers, 6 fuelers, 2 engineering managers. We have an inventory specialist. We do have vehicles. We empower Blue and Gold to manage that crew and that team the best they see fit to tackle those 11 facilities. Those 11 facilities represent less than 5% of our overall allocated labor when we're doing maintenance on those. And I pulled a lot of the maintenance procedures and tasks from the last couple months. And some of those included fixing roll-up doors, fixing non-skid pavement, non-skid decking, fixing broken windows and doors. And those are all subcontracted out parts. We didn't see a real need in that. Now, as this labor tracking comes into play, maybe that'll change our minds if they can put the proof on paper. But we're still open to that idea. And then the tools of sign out tracking system. We haven't had any issues with losing tools and missing tools. We do have the occasional tool go missing, get broken. We're not overly worried about that, but it's good practice. And we did instill that in Central Bay, and we're going to be following that practice system. As I said earlier, to say we're far from being done. There's a lot in our landing page, our dashboard for our maintenance. I've addressed it with the maintenance team. They're on top of it. Basically, we have all our assets listed in the system. We have different type of maintenance programs as recommended from the manufacturer instilled in this system, so that it prompts the engineers to do this work, and it's their responsibility to task the engineers out with this work and organize that work in a manner that it can be accomplished. With that said, we have basically 3 categories of maintenance. I'm going to go over each one of these: hourly, calendar, and on demand. And they really are what they say. So hourly, based on hours. When we drive our car, we go by miles. In the marine world, we go by hours accumulated on the engine. So, for example, one of our class of engines requires an oil change every 400 hours of operation. It's very predictable. There's ease to maintain it. You can properly plan and schedule it, and you have fixed costs. You know what's going to be associated with that. I'll move on. Very similar to hourly based, we have calendar based. And those calendar based are based on, just as they are, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, every 2 years. For some reason this is not moving along.
Just like the hourly base.
Okay, there it goes. Caught up all at once. Again, just like hourly, those can be planned for, they can be scheduled, they have known costs, we know what those are going to be, no excuse for those not to be planned. Now with both of those, we do offer a window. It doesn't mean you have to change the oil on 400 hours. There is a window before and after that we work with the vendors, the manufacturer providers, that we have a window that they can schedule it in properly. So it's easily done. This is where the issue comes in. On demand. That means basically we go on the boat and something is broken. The boat is pulled out of service for whatever reason. They can result from a calendar base. When you do an inspection, you can write a ticket. They're typically not planned or budgeted for, although we do have allocations in our budget for a certain amount of these. And they're typically of failed components or equipment, which also often, unfortunately, leads to vessels out of service. Costs are often difficult to control because we don't know what they're going to be. I've got a couple examples I'm going to run through rather quickly with those, but stop me if you have any questions, and I'll give you a chance at the end to provide more. So some recent challenges, very recent, some of these boats require extensive work, extensive dry docking. And I've got 4 examples, although Hydrus and Cetus were already in dry dock when these items were found, but they were extensive additional costs and extensive additional time added to the planned dry docks that drove up costs, drove up schedule, and it was basically from deteriorating metal in the bilges. And this is part of our maintenance routine that should be followed, and we're finding areas where it was not followed. And we're finding that although this is not listed in our maintenance program, it is listed in our daily startups. The Gemini and Argo are very similar. The Argo, after an extensive out of period of time, it was found that the bilge alarms were going off, and we had water intrusion for the same reason as the Hydrus and Cetus, requiring what we call an emergency dry dock. Means we had to, before we put the boat in service, we had to pull it out of service, we had to take it to the shipyard, we had to get it out of the water. That's called a dry dock. Similar to the Argo, we have the Gemini. Now the Gemini, both of these are on the dock right now. Gemini hit a submerged object that we couldn't see. The Argo, in the case of the Argo, we got it out on one of the local floating dry docks. And in the case of the Gemini, we got it out on what they call a sinker lift. It's basically a rail system that lowers in the water, picks the boat up. In both of these cases, it required extensive hull repair work. You can see in the case of the Gemini, where it hit a submerged log, we had to replace a bunch of the underwater side shell. In the case of the Argo, I don't have a picture of the hull opened up, but in the place of those 2 inserts, they had to be replaced. Pretty extensive work for a shipyard to do. It's kind of common work for a shipyard to do. It doesn't surprise me that it happened. Some people are like, oh my God, the boat has holes in it. It's something we see, unfortunately, in the marine industry. But in the case of bilges being dirty, it's not acceptable, and we're doing something about it. Again, in the case of the Hydrus class boats, you can see these are actually pieces of material that I had the shipyard cut out and sent to me. The material is wasted away to an unacceptable level, requiring those extensive repairs. And the Gemini, case of the Gemini, unforeseen, struck a log, very similar type of repair. But again, all 4 of these repairs ran us up into somewhere neighborhood of $400,000 and average about 2 weeks out of service time for each vessel. With that, I'd love to open it up for questions or comments.
So I just, very general question, I think you mostly answered it. Are you seeing in our maintenance program deficiencies that we're trying to correct that sort of are outside the norm for agencies like this? Or are they sort of the kinds of things you would expect to see and have to tighten up on? If you get the gist of the question. How alarmed should we as a board be about the current state of affairs? Because we did have, we've had a couple of things happen, right? So how concerned ought we be?
I think I understand the question, and I grew up in shipyards, right? So seeing this, I'm not surprised. But for the things that where I believe maintenance is lacking, I'm not going to stand for it. We're going to address it. We're talking to our operator. They've acknowledged it. For these things that we think are not acceptable, I would kind of imagine that if they continue to happen or happen again in the future, they might be up here explaining it to you instead of me.
Thank you.
If it is the difference between deferred maintenance versus an incident where we hit a log or something, insurance, warranty. So out of the 400,000, are we picking up the vast majority of that, or is some of it covered by some?
Great question. These are very recent events, so we're still discussing with management on how we're approaching this and how we're going to address it and final conclusion.
Okay.
So with the bilge hole, what should have been happening that didn't happen that caused so many of them to have that?
Great question. Great question. So not in our maintenance system, and we need to put this in our maintenance system, but in our daily startup procedure, documented procedure for the Hydrus class vessel, it states, check the bilge for water, oil, and coolant spills. And that this didn't happen overnight.
Right. So they weren't checking every day for a long time.
And I'm not saying that, we're investigating it.
Okay.
Thank you. Any, Melanie, anyone signed up to speak on this item?
No one has signed up.
Anyone wish to comment on item 8? Be it you here or in the virtual world?
Just to give a brief.
Sure.
Thanks, Jeff. Tim Anders, Director of Engineering and Maintenance. So, the attempt with the item today was to kind of give everyone the information and show the board and the public what goes on just a yearly basis with vessels and some of the work that we're required to do. And to kind of just answer your question, Jim, just to talk about that a little bit. You know, at my time in another agency at Golden Gate, we had similar failures. And I think a lot of operators specifically that deal with aluminum boats have issues with corrosion. We do feel like this was a preventative issue that should have been addressed. That being said, it's not one of a kind, it's unheard of. I think anyone operating a vessel has experienced some deterioration in the hulls, but we wanted to come here and be open and honest and show kind of what we're dealing with in light of the recent failures that we had. And so we're looking forward to making those changes. And then to address the question on the insurance, that yes, insurance claims will be filed on most of the repairs that you've seen here today, but we're in the process of kind of combining all the costs. As Jeff mentioned, those boats are still in the shipyard. And so when that's concluded, we'll make a decision on that.
And just with the aluminum, and the way it deteriorated, could it be a sign of the original quality of the aluminum too, or?
No, we don't see that. I mean, these are fairly new vessels. And so salt water in aluminum, it creates havoc pretty fast. Didn't, like Jeff mentioned, didn't happen overnight, but it doesn't take too long to start creating that corrosion into the whole plate. And so basically what the Coast Guard requires is, you can have up to a 25% deterioration rate before you have to replace it. And so we were seeing excess of that everywhere. What's important now is that we address it. We don't let it grow. So it becomes more of an issue and we continue to go into these yards and have to do inserts and continue to damage the vessel. So with more routine inspections, better cleaning practices, we have the facilities now to make sure that we are addressing it. We're on top of it. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to make sure that that we take care of these vessels and that this doesn't happen in the future.
Is there changes in, one of the problems with boats is they're in the water and they're hard to see the bottom.
Yeah.
We experienced this with the Klamath when we got it out of the water. The divers who said everything was good, made that look like, walk in the park, right? So is there any improving technology where one can see more clearly what's happening underneath without getting the boat out of the water? I think to your point, is there a way to be better preventative at this? Because you can only really deal with what you see. If you don't see it.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So, basically we have a hull coating on all the bottom out exterior of our vessels. What we're seeing is on the inside of the vessels. So this damage is happening from the inside out. From the outside, we have what they call anti-fouling coating. So we have anti-corrosive, anti-fouling coating. It's a coating scheme that goes on in layers on the hull for those very same reasons. To protect against corrosion and then protect against fouling. So that's what those coatings are designed for. And they've been working very well.
And the technology is increasing and getting a lot better for underwater surveys. We're actually running a pilot on that right now to inspect the exterior, and it's mostly we're focused on the paint coatings to make sure they don't deteriorate, because once they do, then it gets into the mold.
Yeah. Okay, and if not anything else, we don't have to take the roll on this one, right?
Information.
All right, thank you.
Thank
All right, thank you.
And another non-action item is an update on Berkeley Pier Ferry Project. See if you mix the P and the F. Right, fear, that's not good. So Berkeley.
You're wondering, we have someone who wants to make a public comment.
Yeah, we're gonna limit in public comment, I apologize, there's 3 minutes on items. This item and any others, but just to be
On the
aware.
previous item.
I'm not sure if I just saw that.
Oh, that's going to be in McGrath, Berkeley.
McGrath, which item were you wanting to speak on?
I want to speak on this, but I'll wait for the city's presentation.
Okay.
Okay. Me too.
Can you all hear me?
Yes,
I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I just want to say we're really having problems with the audio. So anybody who is, I mean, we're missing a good 25–30% of what's being said. And who's ever at the lectern, can you please speak very loudly and speak into any microphones?
okay, thank you. We'll try to remember that. I don't know whether it's, the microphones here up at the podium or whether it's at the board. Do you know which one's the problem? Aaron?
Me? No, I don't. All I can just say is, especially the prior speaker on like item number 4, we were missing almost half of what was being said. And I'm also dialed in on the phone too, so.
Okay, thank you.
And optionally, if you want to turn on your closed caption, that may be helpful. If you know how to do that, it's under the more button.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair Waterman and Board of Directors. Chad Mason, Capital Planning Manager with WETA. I'm going to provide a brief round of introductions, and then I'm going to turn it over to Berkeley staff to give a presentation. I'd like to introduce Scott Ferris, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront. He's joining us on Zoom. We have Liza McNulty, Capital Improvement Program Manager. She'll be giving the presentation. Roger Miller, Senior Management Analyst. And Yuval Kataria from Kittleson and Associates, a transportation consultant assisting the city. In 2019, WETA and the city of Berkeley established a partnership to study the feasibility of replacing the Berkeley Pier while providing enhanced recreational access and a new ferry terminal that will provide service between Berkeley and San Francisco. The approach on this is rather unique as we are integrated. The city team and the WETA team is more integrated than usual. With hopes of achieving future cost savings and ultimately having a more cohesive project. Typically, we do coordinate with our city partners, but this is much more integrated than our other cases on large capital projects. The project is advancing under the framework established by 2 previously adopted MOUs. The first MOU was approved in 2019, and that was the main purpose was to initiate and complete a feasibility study to look at the options for the project, and that became the baseline for where the project is at today. The second MOU was approved in 2024 with the primary goal of delivering a detailed design package, environmental review and permitting, and that's the phase that we're in now. When these MOUs were approved, the board expressed an interest in getting regular updates with a particular focus on the transportation components. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott Ferris for a quick introduction, and then Liza will take over. Can you unmute?
They're ready to go.
Great.
Okay. Thanks, Chad. I'm Scott Ferris, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront for the City of Berkeley. We've been jointly working on this project with WETA since 2018, are very pleased with our progress and are excited to make the presentation today. And as Chad said, Liza McNulty, who's the city's capital improvement project manager, is also the project manager on this project. And we'll take the lead here in this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. I don't need to introduce myself yet again. I'm going to quickly review the history and context of sort of how we got here today. I'll try to do that quite briefly. And then I'm excited to update you on the design. I'm going to touch on the ferry and pier very briefly, but really be focused on the landside elements and the recreation and first last mile access improvements. Okay, the story of the pier begins almost 100 years ago. when it was constructed in 1926 by the Golden Gate Ferry Company to provide ferry service to San Francisco. It operated as such for about 10 years with the opening of the Bay Bridge in 1937. Obviously, the ferry service then stopped. In the early 1960s, the first 3,000 feet of the pier was restored to provide access for pedestrians to fish, sightsee, and recreate. And so it remained for about 50 years. In 2015, now almost 90 years old, the structural deterioration of the pier resulted in its closure. As Chad gave an overview of, in 2019 to 2021, the city and WETA worked together to complete the feasibility study for a new pier with dual recreation and electric ferry service. That the preferred concept was presented both to City Council and WETA in 2021. In 2023, roughly, the project was allocated over $11 million in funding for design and environmental phases. That included from ACTC, California State Coastal Conservancy, as well as WETA through RM3 funds. We've already covered the MOUs. As Chad mentioned, we're in the second MOU right now. We'll update those memorandums to cover construction and operation phases. This is an review of the preferred concept. Delay. Itself, and then 400 feet along the breakwater. Since its closure in 2015, the Berkeley Pier has been greatly missed by the public. Whether it's fishing, wildlife viewing, a wedding proposal, or just sunset on the bay, bringing this amenity back to the public is a fundamental aspect of this project. That said, I'm not going to talk about that anymore today. We're working very closely with WETA staff to ensure that the pier design incorporates all of the infrastructure necessary for electric ferry service, in addition to the recreation amenities that you see here.
For the record, we appreciate the importance of the pier project.
Indeed. But what I want to focus on today is all of the elements of the project that we're planning on the land side. To revitalize recreation and support first last mile connections directly linked to the new pier and ferry terminal. This provides just a teaser of what we're going to talk about in more detail. So a quick orientation of where we are in the world. This slide shows West Berkeley and all of the Berkeley waterfront. One thing I want to mention while this slide is up, if you haven't been to the Berkeley waterfront in a few years, you might not realize that driving in is no longer like a washboard situation. In 2023, the city completed the Marina Streets Improvement Project that replaced University Avenue from roughly Highway 80 to the entrance to the marina, that red dot you see in the center. So driving in is a much more pleasant experience now. So quick orientation, let's see if my slides work here. So we have University Avenue running through the center of the waterfront that connects the pier to downtown Berkeley. Seawall Drive then runs north-south throughout the area. Let's see, we have the plaza that connects the pier to University Avenue. The seawall parking lot, that's sometimes referred to as the 199 seawall lot. We'll be going into some detail about that parking lot today. And then sort of our anchors, as far as structures go, we have Skates Restaurant immediately adjacent to the pier. And then on the south side, the 199 seawall building, also commonly called His Lordship's. That restaurant has not been in that building for some years now. So recreation, active transportation, and parking are really sort of the three pillars of this project. We have to get those things right in order for this project to be a success. Knowing that, as soon as the city received those grants, the first thing we did before we brought in the design or environmental consultants was engage transportation specialists to help us figure this out. Kittleson started their work in January of 2024, and we just received their draft report last week. We expect to publish that report on our website in the coming weeks. And what I'm going to be presenting today is essentially how we plan to implement the recommendations from Kittleson. And the first one of those is really focusing on bicyclists. What this shows is our proposal to build a new dedicated cycle track down University Avenue. The Bay Trail comes into the waterfront, but it provides a very scenic, lovely route along the water. It's not a particularly direct route, and it's already can be a challenging route because we have bicyclists and joggers and people with dogs and strollers. We know that as folks are coming and trying to catch a ferry, they want a direct route and they want to be able to go fast. And so we're doing that by providing this dedicated cycle track down University Avenue. And this is something we can accomplish within the existing University Ave footprint. As we continue west down University Avenue, we reach the intersection with Seawall Drive. And there's a few things I want to touch on this slide. So quick orientation, this is north is up. So off of the left side of the figure here is the pier and ferry terminal. On the south side of University Avenue, the bottom side of this slide, you can see that cycle track as well as an adjacent sidewalk coming directly in, plugging right into the plaza and pier. On the north side of the road, those blue squares are a dedicated loading and unloading zone to encourage ride shares, essentially, and make it very clear where those can drop off and having that be in very close proximity to the pier. The orange squares there are the buses. So AC Transit has an existing bus stop right here at this intersection, providing that direct access to the pier. What we're planning to do is build for the future. So right now, they only need to be able to park 2 buses to serve the existing service levels in this location. As you can see on that island, we're building for 3 buses so that they can essentially double their service in this location as the demand develops without needing any additional infrastructure. One critical thing to point out here is the total separation of bikers and pedestrians from all of those vehicles we just talked about. Our orientation here has shifted a little bit. So west is now up off of the screen. You can see the pier leading away. And this shows the conceptual design for the plaza. The things I want to point out here are a restroom, which is the white square on the left side. We're planning for secure bike lockers for those folks who do not want to take their bike onto the ferry, and an open, inviting space that not only allows for easy access onto the pier for pedestrians, but also for those emergency situations. We have lots of open space here for emergency vehicles or even just staging of the area in those emergency scenarios. So if we're looking at the water here and you want to turn left and continue walking along the water, we are planning to improve the Bay Trail along Seawall Drive. Again, this is part of the Bay Trail extension system. On the left side, you can see the current status, which is pretty rough, 3 to 4 feet wide and not particularly high quality surface there. On the right, we're still developing our exhibits here. But the intention is to build a fully compliant Bay Trail extension. So that's 12 feet wide, multi-use trail with buffers. All of these improvements provide support for shared and active transportation options for that first last mile connection. But of course, no matter what we do or build, some people are going to arrive by car. The good news is that we have a lot of parking in the Berkeley waterfront. There are over 2,000 parking stalls, over 1,500 of which are under the direct control of the city. And what I mean by that is not leased to any other business. If we exclude the 199 Seawall Drive parking lot, that parking lot has actually been closed for the last few years. It's only open occasionally. That leaves about 1,200.
Why is it closed?
It was originally closed partially to do with overnight camping that we needed to exclude from the area. Some of it has been used for staging in the meantime, and now it's only open during high use periods. Excluding those, that's about 320 stalls in that lot. We're left with 1,200 spaces on the ground today. One of the primary goals of the Kittleson report was helping us figure out how are those parking spaces currently used. And what you can see on the left is that even during peak summer weekend days, we're only using about 50% of those total stalls. The purple line on the top there is that total capacity. Now, it's really important to acknowledge that that 50% is looking at the waterfront as a whole. There are certainly some parking lots that get at or near capacity during peak weekends. And so part of the city management system has to be coming up with a method to ensure that full day parking does not occur in the parking lots that do not have the capacity to accommodate it. And again, this does not include the 199 Seawall lot that has about 300 spaces. So Kittleson identified 4 parking management strategies for us to roll out from day one. The first one of those is to maximize the available stalls at 199 Seawall. I'm going to get into that in more detail on the next slide. The next 2 go together, which is to identify where overflow parking can occur when the available spaces at that Seawall Drive lot are full, and make sure that we're clearly communicating that to drivers so that they know exactly where to go when that first parking lot is full, or aren't confused driving around or accidentally taking spaces where we don't intend for them to be. And so as part of that then is implementing waterfront wide parking regulations. And this is what we're actively working on right now. We plan to present to the public next month our first draft of those parking regulations. And it's going to be a combination of full day, time limited, permitting, free, and paid. 199 Seawall lot, let's touch on this really quickly. Because so west is off the bottom of the page now. Because of that improvement to the Bay Trail along Seawall Drive, we have to reconfigure this parking lot, which gives us a wonderful opportunity to reconfigure this parking lot. We know that we need to maintain in-car bay viewing, the ability to just pull up and see the sunset from your car. That's a really important amenity to many of our users. We want to add electric vehicle charging. And beyond that, we want to reconfigure it for efficiency. This is just one alternative. We're down to about 3, maybe 4 alternatives. Again, we'll be presenting those to the public next month. This alternative adds about 50 stalls to the existing parking lot. So every alternative we're looking at improves the number of stalls that are available. So what I touched on today is the constructed elements to support bicycles, AC transit, and ride shares. But what Kittleson has developed for us is a full suite of transportation demand management measures to help address that first last mile. Some of those measures include shuttles, for example, within the waterfront or connecting the waterfront to West Berkeley. I'm actually meeting in a few weeks with the current operators of the West Berkeley shuttle to talk about long-term coordination, valet service, micro-mobility stations, and more. So our goal as we approach this project is to make sure that we include the built infrastructure from the very beginning to allow for the long-term dynamic management of the transportation needs as they evolve. I'll touch really quickly just on schedule and budget. So here we are in early 2025. We're working right now on layering in all of the technical constraints that we're learning about through our geotechnical and detailed coastal analyses, as well as environmental constraints and public feedback. We're looking forward to really quickly here in the spring, starting with the environmental analysis and then moving quickly towards permitting and final design. If all goes well, we are anticipating being shovel ready, essentially ready to go out to bid in early 2027. And of course, this schedule very confidently assumes that we will have all of our construction funding in place by then and start construction immediately, which would allow us to have boats in the water as early as the end of 2028. Of course, the construction funding is not in hand. This slide provides an overview of the design environmental phase funding, which we have, which is fantastic. This construction cost estimate is from the feasibility phase, so it is somewhat out of date. We expect to get a new cost estimate from the designers within the next few months. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, first of all, thank you for making a good presentation and giving us a sense of the improvements we have. We had a divided board on, left the board disgruntled after we approved, the rest of us voted for it. And so, and it was really around the issues of transit-oriented development and so forth. So I think what you're doing is, it is responsive to what I think the rest of us said at the time, which was, well, yes, but there's this city that's over there, and it actually has like a lot of stuff, and it's a dense urban environment, and there's this university, and there's a lot to do this. So I think this is a good update. Do you have questions, comments? Thank you. Are there folks? I know there's at least one person signed up, so two signed up. So it's going to be, we're going to time you. It's 3 minutes. Who's first? I think it's Jim McGraw.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little hard to see the screen from here. Maybe you could take down the this slide.
So are you ready for me?
Mr. McGraw.
And you can hear me?
McGrath, I'm sorry. Yes.
My name is Jim
I should know.
McGrath. I founded a group called Berkeley, Save the Berkeley Pier. Our mission is to restore that as the beating heart of the marina and to protect the existing recreational users. Berkeley is intensively used for recreation at the present time, and it's also a different place than any of your other terminals. The land in question that the city is planning is in fact filled bay that was filled specifically for the purpose of recreational, to create, as the city said at the time, a permanent recreational facility. So we have our misgivings about the idea of making a commuter terminal about it. But the Bay Plan includes some very important protections that haven't been mentioned. A ferry can be considered for this land only if it does not usurp recreational parking. So we started this process cooperatively, thinking that was a fairly strong protection. Unfortunately, Berkeley has not analyzed the current recreational users and where it occurs, how they get there. In fact, they have only 11 data points that measured parking by recreational users at recreational times, only at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and only on, as I said, 11 days. The problem is they didn't put that in their plans. So they published two reports last year without that. So the information that indicated, in fact, on weekdays, this place is pretty much parked up, has been excluded from the record. Now, there's similar problems because this was designated a park by BCDC, a waterfront park with the conditional consideration. It also triggers Section 4F of the Transportation Act, which insists that you look at alternatives. That's now codified. You can find out that codes. The other thing that was shown is there's a parking lot that's shown. That's in fact the filled bay that was created to create a recreational center and parking for recreational uses. It's not so easy to develop that for any other kind of process. It would, I believe, require a Bay Plan amendment. Now, I've done that twice, once as the Port of Oakland's environmental manager and once as a BCDC commissioner. It's pretty tough sledding. And in order to do that, you have to have, let's go back to the standard, rigorous demonstrations that you're not going to usurp recreational use. Having a slide before you that says somewhere in the marina, there's a parking place, so we're not usurping, doesn't really cut it. So I'll stop.
Give you another 60 seconds, Mr. McGrath. Okay, add a minute.
I've put together letters indicating what the city had to look at. I will continue to follow this, and a fairly detailed critique of their parking studies and their recreationals. Again, recreation doesn't occur unilaterally. It occurs in specific places at specific times for specific uses. And without analyzing that against the BCDC plan standard, you can't go forward.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Claudia?
Actually, I want to cede my time, if it's allowed, to Jim McGrath. Is that possible?
I'm sorry, I can't.
No.
No,
Okay, thank you.
I'm done anyway.
Okay.
yeah, I think he concluded. Did you have comments you'd like to make?
No, I must endorse what Jim said, though. Many recreationists in the area, and I'm on the city's Parks Commission, so we hear from them often, have grave concerns about this, and we're very anxious to see Liza come to our commission meeting next month, and hopefully she'll be able to unravel more of it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we are. Can we move the non-agendized,
Oh, we have one here.
comments?
We have one comment here.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, come on up to the front. Please.
Hi, my name is Isabel. I'm a Berkeley resident and a frequent ferry user. And I just wanted to give my kind of, I guess, support for a Berkeley pier project. I know I appreciated seeing the kind of biking route and other transit option pieces that are part of the project. I think, especially, I know for younger folks like myself who are very passionate about public transit and using public transit, having that kind of built into the way that people can access the ferries and using ferry service is important. And yeah, so I'm very excited to see that this project exists. And I appreciate the other Berkeley residents and their concerns for the recreational space, but I also see how this project could proceed in such a way that all of that is taken into account. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. One of the nice things about SFA Ferry in general that I've noticed is the number of people who bike to the ferry and then put their bikes on the ferry and how much that's grown. And, just looking at the plan, it looks to me like there's going to be a lot of bikes at the Berkeley Pier getting on and off that ferry or storing the bikes for the day in those facilities. So this is, I think it's encouraging to see the direction that this is taken, and realize it's a big project and we don't have a penny to make it actually build it, but we will plan. All right, thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak on this item?
No one else.
Okay, if not, let's consider it closed, and thank you very much. So let's go to public comments for the non-agenda items, which seems to appear twice as 10 and 13. So, but we'll handle it in 10. I don't think we have to do it again on 13, correct?
Correct.
Are there is anyone signed up for item 10? Anyone wish to make a comment? Twice the price for staff. So, okay, let's close this, and we're going to go into a closed session conference with real property negotiators, government code 54956.8. Stephen, do I have to read out the item?
You are fine.
Got enough? Okay, thank you, and we will come. The board of directors met in closed session conference with real property negotiators, government code section 54956.8, and no action was taken. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
All right. Thanks, everyone.